Well, today is May 8th. It's 5/8. So, of course, on 5/8, we're going to talk about the Athens, Georgia band 5/8. I'm welcoming on the show today Patrick Ferguson, drummer of the band, and filmmaker and editor of Weirdo, the story of 5/8, Marc Pilvinsky. Now, Marc reached out to me a while ago to share this documentary with me, and I was not well versed in my 5/8. But once I saw the documentary, I saw just how important this band is to Athens, Georgia, and to that time and scene as it was growing. So if you grew up in the Athens, Georgia area, you probably knew of 5/8. They had sold out the 40 Watt multiple times, very impactful to that scene, and influenced a lot of other artists and bands to come out of it. They're still making music to this day. A new release, I believe, is coming out as we speak. So I want you to do me a favor. And after this interview, I promise you, I want you to go and see if you can see 5/8 live, if you live on the East Coast, more than likely. But if you can't see them live, then try to find some of their music. And once Weirdo, the story of 5/8 is available, I highly recommend you check it out. It's an amazing journey of mental health, overcoming those demons, making music, and fighting your way through. And it is something that we could all use and see and be inspired by in today's age about just following art because you have to, you need to. I once again decided to have, since I couldn't have these guests in person here in my studio, I opened up a virtual interview, and I'll be doing that because obviously there's so many people that I want to talk to and not everybody can make it to me. So I was glad to open this up to these guys, to Patrick from 5/8 and to Marc, the filmmaker, and I'm excited to have this conversation today. So let's get to it. It is time to talk to Patrick Ferguson and Marc Pilvinsky about 5/8 on 5/8. Let's go.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Gibbons.
All right, before we get started on this interview, I would like to remind you about DistroKid. You know I have that link ready for you, distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. Get your 30% off your first year of your uploads. I know you're working on something special and you might as well save 30%. So make sure you use distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof, my personal VIP link that you should be using to save yourself 30%. So go make sure you use that. All right, so let me put on my headphones, pull out my laptop, and let's get to it. Welcome to Waterproof Records, Patrick Ferguson and Marc Pilvinsky. Happy to have you guys here.
It's great to be here, man.
We're so happy to be here. We're both
this
huge
is
fans
great.
of what you do, man.
And it's so
you
many
guys.
times you start telling a story of some band, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to know who this band is. And then, like, at some point in the story, it turns a corner, and I'm like, oh, my God, it's Rage Against the Machine or whatever, you know.
Yes.
But also,
love
back
it.
in the day, I recall you were doing these sort of like, this is what it was like the first time you heard Rage Against the Machine.
Yes.
And one of those was so great, it literally brought me to tears.
Oh, man, that means so much to
I
me.
was like, this
Thank
is
you.
exactly what it was like. You know?
I still want to make those, the what it was like first time hearing. It's just interesting because when it started, it was easy to do because you're picking from milestone songs that really, really like changed your trajectory. There are many, but the list gets shorter over time. You make them and then you don't have the same level of kind of blow your mindness about hundreds of songs. You have it about a very specific amount that makes
probably.
you.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so after a while you go, am I going to be disingenuous if I'm really filming a strong reaction to something that I kind of had that's a pretty good song.
Or you could do the opposite. Like the first time you heard something you just absolutely hated.
You know, that was something that early on somebody suggested about me. And here's the thing. I was a kid in the 90s. I hated on stuff and I definitely had strong opinions about things. But something happened when this became a thing. And the response was, man, there is just so much garbage on the internet, and you are helping me pull out of it. So I just decided early on, I was like, I won't waste any time on things I don't like. I'm only going to talk about the things I like.
Embracing positivity is never a bad plan.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to get to you guys and kind of introduce my audience to how we made the connection. Mark and I began talking. I feel like it's been maybe close to a year and a half ago. It's been a while. Yeah. And you reached out to me and you shared with me the trailer of Weirdo, the story of 5/8. And you are the director, editor of this documentary. And I watched the trailer, and I am full disclosure. I was like, I have never heard of 5/8, and I'm filled with a sense of music lover shame. Like, here I am seeing this trailer, and I'm seeing what an institution they've created in Athens. I know that scene. I know bands from that scene, and I'm just learning about it, and I'm compelled by the trailer. And then I get a chance to see the movie, and I was like, I need to connect with these guys. I need to talk to this band because it's a wonderful documentary, and you have quite a story to tell.
In some ways, I feel like 5/8's story is the story of 90s indie rock that didn't break through, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm like self-aggrandizing a bit, and I don't mean to do that, but like, you know, when we first started as a band, our first manager basically told us that the best that we could hope for was being like a B-tier Sonic Youth, not because of the quality of what we were doing. And this was before the year punk broke. This is in, early 90s, pre-Nirvana. And the thing our actual manager said to me was, it's not, guitar rock is over. It'll never be a thing again. We fired that guy eventually. But but at the time, it was drum machines and sampler-driven kind of R&B and hip-hop and Madonna and Janet Jackson, and that was that time. And there was no guitars on the radio. And so we set out to the most that we could hope for was to be maybe like Mudhoney, which was a band we loved.
Definitely.
And or Uncle Tupelo, which at that time was just an underground band from St. Louis,
Right.
And then the craziest thing that could possibly happen happened, and suddenly the year came that punk broke, and it was a rising tide that lifted all ships, and we rode that tide for a while, and live music exploded into a thing that people went to go and see and do and experience, and it was a glorious time to be a musician and be alive. Yeah. But ultimately, we dodged the bullet of becoming famous, and if we want to get into the reasons where I think that we really dodged a bullet, I'm happy to talk about that at great length. But like, we remain friends.
Do want to get into that.
Yeah, we're still friends. We still make music. We still play shows, and none of us are on celebrity rehab, burning credibility to stay warm, and none of us are dead. None of us went to prison,
Mm-hmm.
People sometimes say, man, it's such a shame 5/8 never made it. I'm like, bro, we made it. We have made it to today.
You made it.
Jacob, you mentioned being ashamed that you had never heard of 5/8 before, but it's really, there's like multiple record labels who should be ashamed.
You're right. I don't want to take the ownership. I was just a kid, and they just didn't get it to me. So give me their numbers, give me their names. I'll chase them down.
Man, some of those folks have just disappeared.
Yeah.
Every now and then I ask, I'll run into someone who worked at a label. And what happened to so-and-so? Was the president of the label? Nobody knows. It's like,
nobody knows. What a crazy time. And you mentioned a lot about the live aspect, and that's definitely what you glean from the documentary, is that you're a band that really were fueled by live performance, from the live energy, being together on stage, and that while there were ebbs and flows with going into the studio, that's tackled a couple times in there about how difficult, what a change it was. But really, to this day, we're finishing the documentary and we're seeing that there's still so much connection when you guys get up and play together. And I really long for the chance to see 5/8 plays. So whether I've got to come out to you or we find a place in between where you guys are playing, and I'd love to see it because the movie does make you go like, God, I got to see this band play live. But before we get into what I want to talk about, what you mentioned, which is, why you dodged a bullet, I kind of want to go all the way back to Marc. How did this project come about? Because I think that this film could be a good way to introduce people like me and so many others to the band and give that story, tell the story. And I'd love to hear just kind of, I think you mentioned 9 years ago.
Yeah. So I went to college in Athens, Georgia, at the University of Georgia, which is where 5/8 is from. And I got there in 91, and 5/8 was kind of, just beginning to really take over the town. REM had broken big. B-52s had broken big, although they were about to get bigger. But as far as, bands that you could see, every 2 months basically in Athens, 5/8 was the one that was selling out the 40 Watt, which is this, 900 person club. It was just, if you got in to see them, it was just obvious that these guys are on fire, and they're probably going to be a national band really soon. And so you've really got to go see them every time they play, because they're going to be playing stadiums next year. It's like guaranteed, basically. That really is the way I felt. As I was a journalist at Flagpole Magazine, which is like the Village Voice or Creative Loafing of Athens. It was a weekly newspaper, and all of us basically felt like 5/8 was these were the guys who were going to break out of here, and like in the same way that REM did or the B-52s did, and they'll probably pull some other smaller bands with them, but it just seemed like you can't see this band live and think that anyone's going to be ambivalent about them. You're going to see them live and you're going to go, I have to tell 10 people about how great this band is. And they had a great debut record and a great second record, and a bunch more after that. But the live show really was the thing with them. And so as a writer for Flagpole Magazine, I went and interviewed these guys when Weirdo came out, which is their second full-length album.
We were complete gentlemen.
I'm sensing a good story here.
I lived it.
These guys were.
We were so burnt by that time. We were doing 200 shows a year, 220 shows a year, and we had done a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
We were running up against the limitations of a record industry that was used to marketing incredibly ambitious bands, right? Bands who wanted to be famous, like Michael Jackson famous or Bruce Springsteen famous, and we wanted a different thing. And so there was all this breakdown in communication between us and the labels, and we were finding ourselves in situations with people who were part of the star machinery, and we had an active contempt for them. And unfortunately, Marc got hit with the blow by from that, and and hit us on a day when by the time Marc met us, we were having contests during interviews to see who could tell the most outlandish lie and get away with it.
At some point during the interview, so I made the mistake of interviewing all four of them together at their practice space. This was in 1994 when their Weirdo record was coming out. And they were I think they were burnt out. They were really sick of doing interviews. And to entertain each other, they would just all lie about everything.
Well, I'm not surprised this happened because you get four buddies together, four bandmates, where we are like that. Dudes are like that. You're around your guys, and you just start going, and
and Marc was
whoever's in your way.
Marc was a college student, and we were awful. And there's some discussion about that in the movie. Like at some point, we just became fairly jaded, and also we had been on tour with this band Sub Rosa, who had previously been Four Squirrels, right?
Oh, I know.
And they
Four
were
Squirrels.
in that
I know
crash.
that.
Did you do a thing
I
on
know
that?
that horrible story.
And the Sabrosa guys made a record that was sort of like a purging of all the trauma from that accident. For people who don't know, the band Four Squirrels had a big hit called "The Mighty KC" that was a song dedicated to the memory of Kurt Cobain, who had taken his own life like a year or two prior. And then they were on tour, and they were trying to get to Atlanta to see another band. It might have been Pearl Jam. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And they were in a Ford Econoline van, and the Econoline famously, if it lost a rear wheel, like if it got a blowout or something, at speed, under load, it would flip. The Four Squirrel guys had this terrible car accident. A couple of people, and one member of the crew and I think one member of the band were killed in the accident. And there was a year or so where they were inactive, and then they reformed as the band Sabrosa, and they made a record that would be actively probably described as difficult listening. And their label lost their minds. They wanted another Mighty KC, and so they became really angry at the label and very jaded, and we were on tour with them, and that anger and that cynicism sort of bled over into our lives in a way that by the time poor Mark, this incredibly kind and gifted young writer, ended up in a room with us, it was just like, sharpen your knives, boys. And anyway, he walked away from that interview with a very bad taste in his mouth.
Yeah, but here you are.
But you know, that's right. I mean, I never stopped being a fan of these guys as a band. I just walked away thinking like, okay, we're not going to be buddies. That's never going to happen. But yeah, so I moved all over the country to Dallas, Texas, and to Los Angeles for 12 years, and always kept up with what 5/8 was doing. They never stopped being a band. Since they formed in
89.
1988.
I joined in
87?
1989 or 1989. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had another drummer before me.
Yeah. So I think in 88 is when they formed. Yeah. Anyway, never stopped being a fan. And when I eventually moved back to Georgia for family reasons, I reached out to Mike, the singer from 5/8, and just said, hey, just so you know, I live here again. I make music videos and films and stuff like that. If you guys have any video needs, let's talk about it. And like 5 seconds later, he got back to me. He was like, hey, we've remixed and remastered Weirdo, and we added 5 songs, and it's coming out on, 180-degree double vinyl, like in 3 weeks. Can we put together a documentary?
Wow.
about
180-degree vinyl is half.
I'm sorry, 180-gram vinyl.
I thought it was just some weird pressing where the needle just like falls on and off the record as it goes around. I was like,
I'm sorry, Mark.
Look, if anybo's going to make a half
It's gonna be
vinyl
5/8.
record,
You hear like 15 seconds of music and the needle just falls.
and then the needle just goes.
Anyway, I pretty quickly made this like 20-minute documentary, just talking to these guys again, and I was smart enough to interview them one
Yes,
at a time.
you knew.
So,
You knew.
it's like there's nobody to impress in this room except I'm hoping you'll tell the truth to me this time, and they did, and I was really blown away by how deep they were, how honest they were, how they had regrets and they were happy to talk about them, and how sort of healthy they seemed all these years later about, everybody having day jobs, but still being a band and still loving each other, even though it's hard sometimes. And just the way it's worth it to be in this band. It's worth all the problems of being around these guys and being in this band. It's ultimately worth it. And I was really struck by the love these guys have for each other. And of course, like, they've never stopped making great music. They have not made a bad record ever, which is really, it's insane that they're going on 40 years as a band and have never made a bad record. So yeah, it just sort of blossomed from there. We made this 20-minute documentary about why Weirdo, the record, was remixed and remastered. And then the band asked me, would I make a feature? And they delivered just like an enormous mountain of VHS tapes and CDRs and flyers and posters,
Cassettes
and like 1,000 photos and
just
all this stuff. So many cassettes, hundreds, mini discs. It was like an archive of analog media from the last 40 years, delivered all this stuff to me. And I just said, okay, well, if I have all this material, I think there's a movie here. And so I thought it would take 2 years probably. And,
took
and
9
it took
years.
9.
Hoarders
Well,
take
hey.
note. Throw nothing away.
Yes, that's very true. It's very true. And you know, boy, do we come from a different time in terms of like the physical media and the things that we record. Whereas now, geez, just the footage alone of my children on my phone, I think to myself, I'm like, if you guys really wanted, you could watch your existence from the time of birth till now. And yet it's just going to go sit on a hard drive somewhere. But back then it was like, you know, bands on the road, filming things, capturing things, recording things. I'm so glad that amongst all the ups and downs that it was maintained, it was kept, these recordings were preserved, and now they exist in this film. And not only so, I want to hope that this film will become available for everybody to see so that I can point my audience to it so they can experience it too. But so much of it's not just music. So much of what you guys know I put out in the world is good vibes, good energy. I speak about mental health. I speak about things that we go through and how music, as you can see, what I make, it's healing. It's something that can kind of like help your heart, mend it. And so much about this film is about the journeys of mental health and persevering and coming through that, and then having a brotherhood of a band and going through these difficult times. But really, fame or no fame, whatever it may be, the healing power was in this art that you shared together. And that was when I was like, everything about Weirdo, the story of 5/8, and 5/8's story is so a part of what I'm trying to put out in the world. And so I'm so glad that we made this work, because my hope and dream was to have you guys sitting here live with me. But I was like, we're going to do a virtual one because I've got to be able to talk with Patrick and talk with Marc and share this story. And what I love more than anything is that this episode will release on May 8th, 5/8. Yes.
So I think that you're sort of knocking on the door of something that I think is really important about music, which is its ability to act as like an emotional emetic, right? Like so many people are encouraged in their lives culturally to just keep their emotions stuffed down and not indulge them and not allow themselves to feel things until you get in this sort of rarefied environment where, especially live performance music or dance or live theater. My wife's a professional theatrical person, and then you could sort of have this vicarious empathetic moment where this performer is having this emotional experience and you go along for the ride. I talk about it a little bit in the film, but I always used to talk about it's why these why the lights are so low at Willie Nelson concerts, because
I love that line.
Yeah, these old biker dudes with wizard beards can cry into their beers in peace, you know, about lost love or lost opportunities or the life that they lived, you know. I mean, I still get sort of sadly nostalgic looking back at the 90s, not because it was a bad time, it's just because it was so beautiful, and it's just always going to be the past now, you know. And going back and listening to certain records like rekindles a lot of those emotions I felt. You know, playing festivals where every band on the bill was something that I was into, you know. Like I sometimes, there was a band recently, there's a modern performer named Eka Vandal who's from Australia.
Right.
And her music evokes, the first time I heard the Pixies, the first time I heard Jawbox, the first time, even sometimes remembering like the first time I heard Nirvana, and I still get that rush of not just nostalgia, but also just joy at the just the purity of it. She's so great, and you know, I feel like that's part of the role that art plays in our lives. It deepens. It's like weightlifting for your emotional life. You know, you were talking about healing. Did you know that I used to do a podcast, a music podcast? It's called,
no, I wasn't aware.
It's called Crash and Ride. I haven't done an episode in a while, but I interviewed Dave Pajo from Slint and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and I was the one who introduced Dave Pajo to the Gang of Four guys, so he was in Gang of Four. Because after he did the podcast, you know, I had his number, and I know Hugo. Hugo's in the Hugo from Gang of Four is in the 5/8 movie, and a bunch of Riley Walker did it, and probably the most listened to episode of it because he opened a vein for that podcast. He told some deep truths, and it was really powerful, and it was very healing for a lot of people. And there's artists you don't know that I think are some really great episodes. There's a guy, Evan Rowe, who's a drummer from the Triangle, Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh. Mm-hmm. He did an episode. He talked about his treatment and drug and therapy-resistant depression, and how eventually he started doing the ketamine injections, and it saved his life. And several people emailed me after hearing that and was like, I'm going to the doctor. And later on, they were like, this is working. This is saving my life. So, Crash
several people.
Still on Spotify. It's probably still on Apple Podcasts. I haven't done an episode in a long time, but I've been talking about reviving it. So,
well, I think it's incredibly important. Thank you for sharing that. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Jacob, if you don't mind, I'll step in. One thing, I think the reason what you do, your TikToks and Insta videos about, hearing music for the first time, it connects because people have nostalgia about it, and it connects because you're funny when you make these things. But the main thing is you really capture the emotional feeling of what it was like to have your mind blown by this new music. You really do capture that, and that is it's priceless. It's priceless, and that's I think so much of your success is that you really did capture what it's like to have your hair blown back by the new Smashing Pumpkins song
too,
or whatever
right? It's
it
sort
is.
Of you as a Gen Xer, you grow up with this sort of this impetus is being put on you, like your parents' generation had Woodstock, and and nothing you ever do is going to compare to that. And you were like, bro, I have side 2 of my war,
exactly.
And that means a lot to me, but also to then just have new art fall into your life that just, connects with you on an emotional and personal and intellectual level all at once is, it's validating. It's like, oh yeah, we are here and here we are,
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the kind words. And I don't know how I landed in the position where I could have conversations with amazing artists and bands like this, but I feel
the truth.
Very, I guess truth. So. I wasn't. I was just putting myself on screen and sharing what I felt. I wasn't trying to get anything else out of it, but I'm happy that I'm here. And I'm happy that we could share this with everybody about your mental health podcast and what it is to really feel this connection, because we know from our generation, Gen X, and I think even elder millennials have this as well, but the inability to talk about where you really are. I think the younger generation, I'm starting to see a lot more of the they really do talk about their feelings, but we'll see how their generation ages. Mm-hmm. But ours, it's like men in particular, to be sensitive and open and say that you're not going through a good time, things are rough, or to just be vulnerable and honest, especially with your guy friends. But there is something really amazing when you're standing there and you're listening to a band with friends, or you're in a band with friends, and it's like there's this a guitarist friend of mine who's he's from the band Orange 9mm, but now he plays with Bush, and his name's Chris Trainer. And he said, music is the only art that passes through your body. And I loved that idea of just the sonic wave passing through you, of art passing through you. Mm-hmm. And it is truly remarkable. I've thought about that quote every day since he said it, of it is an art form that we all kind of share, these waves and these sounds, and just how healing they can be and stir up everything from sadness to joy, while you're in this community of other people. And it's truly remarkable. And I think that you get that from this documentary. You get that is what happens with your band, with all the ups and downs and everything that has happened, that music still brings you four together.
Yeah, we still have. I mean, we've all weathered marriage and divorce. We've all been through loss of parents. Mike and Dan's fathers passed, and we were on tour when it happened. And Sean's father passed once. We have we didn't just grow up together. We're growing old together, and people talk about the male loneliness epidemic. I'm like, man, a bass costs $250, dude, and it's not that hard to play. just start a band.
Get a bass, start a band, have an excuse to sit in somebody's basement and just try to figure out how to play some old tune.
Yeah,
I love that.
It's just
amazing.
Like I said, it's weightlifting for your emotional life. Because, I can't remember the name of the researcher, but they did a whole thing about mirror neurons and how empathy. You have these neurons in your brain that process emotion by watching someone else process emotion, and that's why Shakespeare is so powerful. You don't have to have sex with your mom and murder your father murder your uncle. To go through the emotional roller coaster that Hamlet does. That's not Hamlet. That's Oedipus.
Oedipus.
Oedipus, sorry. And that's not Shakespeare. But
but I get your point. To your point,
wife would lose her mind right now.
Your wife comes running in and she's like, "I'm in the theater. I need to."
Yeah. Just here to issue a correction, sir.
Just a quick correction.
Yeah. Oedipus is. Hamlet's uncle murders his father.
Hamlet is an example. Yeah, it's a good example of you don't have to live the life of going insane, Ophelia killing herself, all of these things in order to understand the power and the beauty.
And to just also stretch those muscles, sometimes also experiencing someone else's sadness vicariously, like listening to a Tom Waits record kind of helps you understand the contours of the sadness that you're afraid to address at this moment on your own, and prepare you for a time in the future when you can really process.
So true. So very true. This is a perfect time for me to figure out one of the things I always ask my guests on the show is what I have called a waterproof record. It's just the term of the podcast. And it really is, I always ask for that album, the transitional phase of you're a teenager, maybe before 10, maybe before teenage years. But it's that turn where your parents have shown you stuff up until this point, or it's whatever's on the radio. It's just, and then this thing happens and something goes off in your brain and you go, I'm never going to be the same after this. So who would like to go first with their waterproof record choice?
Mark, do you want to go first? You want me to?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. It'll be quick. I think it's the first Suicidal Tendencies record. I was an Army brat, so I moved every 2 or 3 years up until I graduated high school. And when I moved to South Korea for 2 years, my first 2 years of high school, I tape traded with people. This was in 88 and 89. No. This was in 86 and 87.
86 is when Institutionalized just took over the world.
Yeah, because the album is 83 released, but I don't think it really gets its due until Institutionalized is on MTV, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't have MTV when I lived in Korea, but I did tape trade with people. So I was getting, rehearsal tapes from Dark Angel and Death, and people were sending me Corrosion of Conformity, the early EP and all this stuff, and I started a zine, and so record labels started sending me free stuff. It was like
they didn't
amazing.
send me free stuff when I had a zine.
But that first Suicidal Tendencies record, the incredible way it balances really aggressive, really sort of like, stereotypically manly, aggressive feelings with the opposite, with a guy who wonders if he's going insane, with a guy who really is wondering, is he possessed, a guy who is really dealing with mental health problems. And the way that the way that album made me feel, the way that it let me get out these bad feelings in a safe way. It's the way Mike Muir, he got out those feelings he was having. He didn't kill himself. His band has been called Suicidal Tendencies for
40 years, yeah.
over 40 years. The guy he just played Coachella last weekend. This aggressive music is a way for him and me to not act upon our worst impulses. And it just has always really been incredibly important to me, that record. I think for decades, that was the record I had heard more than any other record. And I just really appreciate that it is, so much of it is really fast. Like, if you ever try to sing along with those lyrics, it's really difficult. But there's also really slow, beautiful parts where he's actually singing. That song "Possessed" has those moments. Anyway, that's I think that's an incredibly just perfect.
Did you tell us my first hardcore show?
Record.
Suicidal Tendencies. My first hardcore show was
What's
Suicidal
that?
Tendencies at the Metroplex in Atlanta. At like '86.
Oh, nice.
First stage dive.
I saw a couple.
everything.
I saw a couple shows there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Death there, and I saw Dark Angel there, but not they were closed by the time pretty soon after I got.
It's a great choice. I'm glad you chose it because I have my fair share of Suicidal Tendencies history as well. I didn't discover them until Lights Camera Revolution, but my brother and I got that cassette, and when my mother found it, she freaked out big
It's
time.
called
She was
Suicidal Tendencies. It's just
totally.
your mom.
She was so scared, and so we had Suicidal, and we had bought Megadeth, Rest in Peace, and my mom found Megadeth and Suicidal Tendencies, and she just she literally was like, "We're going to the church counselor tomorrow." And, I grew up in Oklahoma, so my sweet Christian mother.
What part?
And she threw those tapes in, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Just right there.
Were you just there?
My wife,
Yeah.
my daughter is an enormous Outsiders fan. So we had 4 or 5 days, and we just made a road trip of it, and we drove all the way from here to Tulsa and went to the Outsiders Museum and went to the drive-in to see a movie because the movie was showing there, and yeah.
I love this more than anything because
Amazing.
my mother was in the Outsiders.
What?
Yes. You can't see her in the final film because she was just an extra. They hired her as a school teacher because she was a school teacher, and she's on set. And then finally in the anniversary edition that they released years later, there's this shot, this extra bonus scene, and sure enough, we got it. And I was like, "There you are, Mom! There you are! You're walking down." But I have to bring up, which I'm so excited. My audience won't get to see this that listens to the show, but what I'm about to show you right now is a picture of my mom and Francis Ford Coppola when she was
amazing.
on the set of The Outsiders.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So my mom is a college
Amazing.
professor, and back then she was an English teacher. And these films, both that and Rumblefish, being shot at the same time in Tulsa, Oklahoma, just double whammy. They were obviously looking for talent, but I love that the connection to Tulsa is through The Outsiders, and that I get to talk about my awesome mom who was in The Outsiders and hung out with Coppola. So, yeah, such a small
great.
world.
Yeah. Actually, my wife is from Tulsa.
You're kidding? What?
And,
this is crazy.
yeah.
This is
And
what is going on?
Our friend Bill Hader is from Tulsa.
Okay, so Bill and I have never met, but we are like contemporaries. He went to another high school. I went to Jinx High School.
Was he a Soj?
Yeah, he was
You were a
a
greaser?
Soch, for sure. I was a greaser. I was like over there with my switchblade.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was on the south end, and I can't remember what his school is called. It was like Bishop Kelly but he went to one of those schools, and I was a comedian voice guy too. And so what's so funny is it's so crazy that we didn't ever cross paths, or maybe we did and I had no idea. But when he blew up on SNL, there was so much of that. Oh, boy, I was envious because I was like, I moved to LA trying to make it as an actor and comedian. And I'm like watching Bill. I'm like, I'm from Tulsa. I do voices.
Yeah. Well, he never did any of that stuff in Tulsa.
Yeah.
He moved to LA to make films, and really just sort of joined this this improv troupe, this sketch group called Animals from the Future, just kind of as a lark. And he took a couple classes at I can't remember if it was UCB or the other one, but
Second City.
but anyway, yeah, Second City. It was Second City, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, then he just he was in the right place at the right time.
I love him, and he is way better at characters and voices than I ever was. I am a Bill Hader fan. I followed his career through SNL,
Better
and
than being a
I
Bill
could.
hater, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not a Bill Hader hater. I think he is wonderful, very talented. I'm so happy for him. He represents the best part of a place like Tulsa, and I've heard him on interviews say how he goes, my friends back home are funnier than I am. You guys see me as this.
Me.
Yeah, and I was like, he's talking about me in a way, but
Jacob,
no,
do you
he's
still do voiceover work?
So I moved here in 2001 as an aspiring actor. I was a theater major. I did musical theater and Shakespeare and productions. And so I came here like every bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, aspiring young actor trying to make it in the movie business. And very early on figured out that, I had to work, I had to have a job, and that really changed the trajectory. But for the past 20 years, I don't want to make this podcast about my journey,
No, I'm
but
fascinated by this.
But I spent 20 years trying something new every few years. One was, I tried to screenwrite, and I had a partner, and we wrote scripts, and we tried to get them optioned. And then I was always working in the studio system, MGM, and then NBC Universal with these desk jobs. And I would just try and hustle. And then my friends and we made web series. And then I got into stand-up comedy, and I would grind night after night after night trying to do all of these things. And it wasn't until about 2019 that I actually just was like, you know what? I think I'm done with the entertainment industry. Nothing's ever landed. We made a movie. We almost lost everything. And I just kind of was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And when we were in the middle of the pandemic, that first video that I made was really in the COVID times on TikTok. And the only reason I think that it worked was I could have never prepared that being an actor, comedian, writer, music aficionado, that all these skills, my 10,000 hours in each, would be compressed into a 1-minute video that would be the best thing that I could give to the world, and I didn't even know it. And so it changed my life dramatically. And it's wild because if you would have grabbed 25-year-old Jacob, he would have never known, I thought I have to make it as the next big, actor in film and TV, or I'm going to break comedy and I'm going to be the next, Bill Burr or whatever. I'm going to be Steve Martin. And none of those things ever landed for me. So that's my journey as well. I watch your story.
Can I tell you a story that didn't make the movie, because I don't think I ever told it into a camera, but it illustrates that moment. We used to play the Kentucky Derby a lot in Louisville, there was a club, I think it was called Tooligans, and then there was the Butchertown Pub, and we would play one of those two clubs, and it was always pretty hectic because people are brown liquor drunk, and so a lot of times, we were not just carrying our own emotional weight, but we were trying to guide the room in a way that kept it from getting violent, and we were just so burnt. We were doing 200 plus shows a year, as I mentioned earlier. And I remember I was drinking coffee the next morning at an outdoor. There was a place called Bardstown Road in Louisville, which is where the hip record store was. And there was like a closed off pedestrian only section right near there. And I was drinking coffee. And at that time, the band King Kong, which is a Louisville band, was making some noise on college radio. And I don't remember who this person that was with us was, but they were a local person. And whenever somebody's become successful, there's always people in their town that kind of run them down, right? And so I'm sitting there drinking coffee, and I've got one eye barely open, and I'm really exhausted. And he elbows me in the ribs, like, "Hey, you see that guy?" And there's a guy washing dishes, You could see him through the back of the cafe next to where we were drinking coffee. And I said, "Yeah, that's the drummer from King Kong. And he's washing dishes," with pure contempt in his voice, Wow. And I thought, he gets to sleep in his own bed tonight. You
Wow.
know? And I was
Yeah.
just like, I want that. I want to go home. I'm so tired.
go
I wanted to go give the guy a hug. You know, like
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
jealous. You know, I was like,
That's
man,
amazing.
we were so exhausted, and I remember like I'd love to meet that guy one day and be like, I think you did amazing work, and I'm glad that you survived it. If he did,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm so glad you told that story. That's perfect. Perfect. Lines
I mean,
up
there's
exactly.
a moment where you're just like, I don't even know if this is what I want anymore.
Yeah.
You know, what
Yeah.
exactly did I want? You know, and that's the
Yeah.
big question, right? And that's the sort of question that was sort of hanging over us as we made the film. Like, we had this idea that we wanted to make it, but we didn't really have any idea what that meant. You know,
Totally.
Ultimately, and one of my podcast interviews was with Chris from President of the United States of America. And,
Right.
we were talking about how you're on this loop where you make a record and you tour, and you make a record and you tour, you make a record and then you tour. And even though the rooms are getting bigger and you go from like a van to a bus, 5/8 never did that, but his band did. And it's this rut, and it does not, and there's someone from the record label constantly going, I know this room sucks. I promise you that the next place is going to be better. And you're going to, you know, and you start to realize at some point that you're jumping through all these hoops and you're making a lot of money for other people. I encourage everyone here to read Steve Albini's essay, The Problem with Music. It's online in a million places.
Yes.
You're essentially a calf to be slaughtered. You're making money for someone else. They keep promising you it's going to get better. And I think that a lot of people just get off the bus. Chris did. He just called it, you know, one day. And he's now Casper Baby Pants, and he writes amazing Beatlesque music for kids. 5/8
So great.
burned out, broke up, briefly reformed with different people. People came and went, and we found that we still loved music. A lot of people, I've been friends with some bands that are, as a roadie, you're in rooms with a lot of musicians, and every now and then someone will turn to you and go, I hate this. You know, I don't like those guys that I play music with for years, but, you know, we make X number. The B-52s, fortunately, are all lovely people, and this is not descriptive of their organization at all, but I've been out with other bands, and you could probably find my resume online and figure out who I'm talking about, but I wish you wouldn't.
I already did.
Yeah.
I already did.
and those people are just like, I guess we're going to go around again and make some money, you know? Fortunately, the bands I've worked for directly, Culture Club, Gang of Four, B-52s, and a few others are all pretty great organizations. People who care for each other and take really good care of their roadies. But some of the bands we played with, man, just the rage, you know, like 4 dressing rooms, 4 different people, 4 entourages, no direct communication. All communication happens through emissaries. It's just like, why are you guys doing this?
Right.
You got to make money, you know?
It goes back to the definition of what does it mean to make it. And honestly, and that's where we started at the beginning of this, is like, you guys made it, because in the end, whether I'm quoting kind of a more esoteric notion of like our existence and the meaning of life, you know, when you get to the end and you look back and it's about watching the leaf fall in that moment, or the way the shadow casts on your loved one's face. And it's not about these big wins, these big moments, but it's really about the smaller things. And, you know, I'm with you as well, that I always thought when I was in my 20s what my idea of making it was. And I think if any of that had been given to me at a young age, I think I would have self-destructed.
Within your life. You know?
Yeah, it just would ruin me, because I wasn't ready for it. And now that I'm here, every day is filled with gratitude. And I sense the same with you and Mark. It's just like, when you are given an opportunity to enjoy art, share things that you love, where we are right now, I'm just truly grateful. And that's really the takeaway that I got from Weirdo, was that you guys are just happy to be doing what you're doing. And that's a good thing to put out in the world, to be like, remember, you may spend 30 years going after it, but if you can stand here at the end and be happy with what you've done and still enjoy it, then I'd say that's making it.
I think sometimes about there are artists from late 80s and early 90s who set out to be the new Bob Dylan and ended up getting packaged and commodified and sold as a bubblegum pop star, and they're bitter now.
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably fill in some names here if you wanted to, but I don't want to.
No, we don't have to. We could just play Mad Libs at home. Enter in artist here.
Think about Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain decided he wants to be as big as Mudhoney, and he gets fired into the sun by the machinery of capitalism. And now he doesn't know who his real friends are, right? Because every relationship is now freighted with commerce, right? It's freighted with some kind of transaction, and you can't just have bros anymore. And he became very lonely, and he killed himself. The thing I always say about, but see, the gift that Kurt gave us as a society, as music fans, is we got the Nirvana catalog, right? Everyone enjoys a barbecue but the pig, you know. Like we all got something from that, and he got destroyed, and you know, and you can point to shortcomings of him treating trauma with drugs, or just a sort of a lack of ability to. My dog is desperate for me to pet her. She's right here. But no one's wired for what he went through, you know.
No.
And it breaks my heart that there wasn't more of a support network as he became increasingly isolated and lonely. And so when you say, like, we made it, like, Kurt Cobain did not make it, you know. He made it, but he didn't make it, you know.
He left something behind. He left behind art, but him as a person.
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't trade a platinum record $1 million for the ability to take my kid with me when I take the dogs to the dog park and just have a lovely afternoon like we did today, you know.
Yeah. It's very, very true.
Yeah, it's
well said.
I'm sure a lot of people whose family members got chewed up by the machine don't give a rat's ass about any of that stuff if they could, just have a dad or still have a brother or whatever, you know.
It's very true. Thank you for sharing that, and it's amazing that the journey that we've been on since Marc's suicidal tendencies recommendation.
I still have to talk about the record.
Yeah, I was going to say, I still need to hear what yours is, what I loved about this is that Marc gives me a title for him, and I'm like, all right, this is suicidal, know it well. And then a complete hard left turn from Marc's selection. Patrick, what was your waterproof record?
Well, instantly I thought of a record that absolutely changed my whole life, right? When Marc started talking about suicidal tendencies, I just suddenly had a flashback to the first time I heard the Dead Kennedys, the record with Nazi punks fuck off on it. I think that was Fresh from Rotting Vegetables, but it might have been Plastic Surgery Disasters. But both of those records kind of landed in my life at the same time. And the first time I heard it, I thought, this sounds like dogs barking. Like Jello's Jello Biafra's vocals on those records doesn't sound like any record you've ever heard before if you've never heard hardcore. And it, it's got that like staccato shouting thing, and my mind was so blown. But my waterproof record is not a punk record, which is surprising considering what a role it's played in my life. But at some time in the summer, the summer before I tried to start college, there was a scene in Atlanta, a punk scene that daytime sort of vagranted around Little Five Points in Atlanta, and there was a pizza place there called Fellini's Pizza. And I walked into Fellini's Pizza, an angry young man who did not give a fuck about saxophones, had zero interest in anything that wasn't Three Chords and the Truth, Black Flag, Minor Threat, 7 Seconds. Those are my bands. SNFU. They were all written on my Converse high tops in Sharpie. I ordered 2 slices of pizza. They were probably cheese because I was a vegetarian at the time. I sat down and someone dropped the needle. Figuratively, it's probably a CD on A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. And I stopped eating. I sat there in silence for the entire record. And I could feel the music in that space where your brainstem connects to your spine in a way I had never heard or felt music in my life. And Elvin Jones's strumming was like the rumbling of tectonic plates to me. And McCoy Tyner's piano was the most spectral, almost psychedelic thing I had ever heard. And of course, then you have John Coltrane's saxophone, just essentially giving voice to every bit of anguish and joy and everything in between of a human life. And that record changed my life that day. Like, I walked out of there questioning everything I knew about music. I had never heard music like that. I did not know anything about bop. I didn't know anything about music theory other than Dee Dee Ramone going 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, so I knew a measure had 4 in it. You know, because that's how they start, right? And it spun me out, man. Like, I remember asking the sort of like punk hippie dude, which was a hybrid that existed at that time, maybe not so much now. Of course, they're tribalized, behind the counter, what is this music, as I was walking out. And he said, oh, bro, it's A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. And I walked around the corner to Wax and Facts Records, which is the only record store any human being would ever need in the world. That's the absolute greatest record store of all time. And the people who work there, it's crazy. Steve Gorman played drums for the Black Crowes, worked at Wax Effects. Kelly Hogan, the absolute chanteuse of Cabbagetown, which was the working class neighborhood in Atlanta, the voice of Atlanta music. She worked at Wax Effects. Like, everybody works at Wax Effects. Wow. You know, I mean, I guess our argument could be made for Wuxtry in Athens being the only record store you'd ever need, but because that's where REM met. But I walked in there and I immediately bought a CD because vinyl was too fragile for my absolutely rough and tumble life, you know. And I listened to it daily for at least a year, like just trying to figure out what was happening. You know, like there's just so much on that record that, you know, the funny thing about going back to records of your youth as a musician who's played for 50 something years now, 40 plus years now, not quite 50, but and I go back to records that sort of transfixed me in my youth that I haven't listened to as much since. Like, I was a huge Pink Floyd fan when I was younger and only recently revisited it, and a lot of the things that sounded like alchemy or witchcraft, and I now hear as bass, drums, and keyboard and guitar or analog synth or whatever. But the A Love Supreme still defies my ability to hear it as instruments. It solely exists as pure emotion to me. I don't hear saxophone, bass, and drums except when, of course, Jimmy Garrison or Elvin Jones takes a solo. But that record still means more to me maybe than any other record of my collection. I now have it on vinyl. I have 2 different pressings on vinyl, and I'm a snob. But the thing that I made me realize, and this is super important, is that I have spent many years at that point learning to play drums, right? Mm-hmm. Learning to play drums as fast and loud and hard as I possibly could. And that record made me step back and go, oh, I need to learn to play music on the drums. And it really changed my whole approach to music, to listening, to playing, to spirituality. It doesn't surprise me that, you know, there's a church in San Francisco, there used to be anyway, that their sacrament is A Love Supreme by John Coltrane.
That's amazing. I did not know that. I could hear you talk about this for a long time because honestly, I was like, my knowledge and understanding of Coltrane is not deep. And when I heard you describe that feeling of sitting there with the cheese pizza and that feeling in your spine, I think all of us music lovers know that feeling and can assign it to a moment, a thing. And that's exactly what you understood the assignment, which is that is the waterproof record. That is the thing that it completely changes you. And
I was almost anxious in that moment, right? Like I remember thinking, what if I don't get this? What if I never understand this? Like, it was like it would be like, you know, like being abducted by aliens in a way, because it just took me completely out of the world that I understood, you know?
That's great. It's great. It's perfect. It's perfect. And again, with yours, Mark, and Suicidal, these things are, and there's other albums and there's other bands and pieces of music that can do the same thing. But because when I've asked this question, sometimes it's, can I have multiple choices? Can I choose several? But it's always great to hear when we can really laser in on one. And if I was to show my listening audience 30 seconds of that record, Coltrane, what would be a moment that you would highlight that if they could hear a snippet and they'd be like, oh, no, this is really a good part there? Because each one looks like pretty lengthy. It's like 4 or 5 songs on the album, I believe, in total.
Yeah, there's 4 songs. They're movements more than songs.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I love Brian Blade now. Brian Blade is, of course, the amazing jazz drummer and band leader from Louisiana. I think he lives in New Orleans now, but I think he's like maybe from Shreveport originally. But like, if you do yourself a favor and go to your YouTube search bar and type in Brian Blade Chicago Music Exchange and watch the 22-minute one-song performance that they did there, and it's very similar in that way to John Coltrane, and the song is just movements that changes, the mode changes, the melody changes, but it's still one continuous piece of music. I guarantee you that's the closest thing I have to religion these days, is that particular performance. It's got like 160,000 views, and I think 49,000 of them are probably me. But but there's a long bass solo. Jimmy Garrison plays this long bass solo, and he does a descending pattern at the end, and drops down a diminuendo, and then the whole band comes in, and it's. I imagine it's what it feels like the first time you experience weightlessness. Like the band surges, there's a big like crescendo, and then it pulls back a little bit, and it's just like, man, it's brilliant. I don't remember exactly where it happens on the record, because for me, I just hit play on that record and
I'll
go
find
on a
it.
journey. Yeah,
I'll find it because I want to experience it. You can practically see a Jacob Givens video first time where I'm going weightless right when that comes out. Right?
It's one of the most, and I think, John Coltrane's. Have you ever seen his diagram of the circle of fifths and harmonic relationships between it? It's another thing you should definitely Google, because it's a handwritten thing, and it forms this 6-pointed star because, of course, the circle of fifths. Anyway, I don't want to get too. I'm a drummer, and I don't.
That's
really,
okay.
My understanding of music theory is basically telling someone, "Don't do that." But I honestly think that he had a bit of mania, right? Like, he was sort of medicating in his early career with opiates, and at some point he got clean, and for the rest of his life he would play saxophone for 20 hours a day and notate music, write music, compose 20 hours a day until he would fall asleep in a chair, and his wife would come and take the saxophone out of his hands, and she would know that he had started playing again 4 or 5 hours later when he woke up and started playing saxophone again. And it to me is one of the strongest arguments for a spiritual plane that exists outside of the material, because he tapped into something universal and beautiful and powerful, and you can see it in the way that he illustrated music, and you can see it in his dedication to music, especially as his career progressed from sort of hard bop to it's like the Blue Train era into this whole other impressionistic pure music thing that happened, in his sort of middle to late career. It's something else.
That is something else. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to be very important to let my audience understand a style of music and a genre, and probably something that the majority of them aren't as familiar with. And I love that about this question. We've obviously been talking for a minute now, so I probably shouldn't keep you guys until midnight, but I did want to ask before we wrap things up, I do believe there is a new record.
Yes. And
as of this airing, I believe it's today.
Yeah, it came out today.
That's right. It comes out
right?
May 8th,
is this
2026.
Is this the music
5/8.
that in the documentary we kind of see we're back at it again? Is this the stuff that's being worked on?
We were coming out of the pandemic, right? We had 5/8 continued to practice even pre-vaccinations. By Dan Horowitz at that time lived in a house, and there was an outdoor, like a deck. We used to talk about Dan's huge deck. We would set up on the deck outside and masked outside, because we still at that time didn't know if that was, how.
Sure.
It was such a scary time, but we also, even scarier was the possibility of not playing music. And we would go out there and practice and write. I remember once we were in the middle of a practice and we looked up and there was some guy watching us, and we were like, "Hey, who's Dan? Who's that? It's your neighbor?" He's like, "Oh, that's the mayor. That's Kelly Gertz." This mayor of Athens was standing at the bottom of the hill watching us practice. He's like, "Man, I haven't seen the 5/8 shows in 2 years. It's great." So
That's great.
Yeah, Kelly's a good dude. So as things began to loosen up, I think they only reopened the rehearsal spaces at Nucci Space, which is, by the way, nuci.org, nucci.org. That's a local nonprofit. That's a mental health resource for musicians, and they have rehearsal spaces that you can rent by the hour. And they had only reopened like for a couple of weeks, so we went in and had maybe 6 practices of the material that Mike had been writing during the pandemic, and we went in the studio without really having finished the songs, and we finished them in the studio. And at some point early in this movie, Mark points a camera at me and goes, "Do you guys really know these songs?" And I'm like, "No, we don't."
No, we don't know.
I mean, really, one of my favorite moments in the movie is that moment there where you, the drummer of the band, you go, "Yeah, but we're just recording rhythm section stuff today." And I wish at the moment I had said, "Yeah, but you're in the rhythm section and you don't know half these songs."
It's true. What's funny is that I don't know. I love recording. I really love recording, and I love rehearsing. Playing live, I like that too. To me, the process of recording is such an interesting challenge. For not this record, although I finished drums in 2 sessions in this record. The record before that, Songs for St. Jude, I did all the drums in one day. We did one mammoth, like 12 to 15-hour session, and I remember at like 4 o'clock in the morning listening to the click track on my headphones thinking, "Someone please kill me. I'm so tired."
Yeah.
And that was at like 1 o'clock, and we finished at like 4 a.m. But
wow,
I love those marathon recording sessions because you're forced to dig deep and be agile and be flexible, and also those stay on the click track. Well, I like to record to a click because then I know I'm not playing things too fast on the record.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, a click track is a metronome that's in your headphones when you're recording.
Yeah.
And the drummer usually has it, and sometimes other people in the band, but the drummer has to have it so that if you ever have to edit, like if you misplay a section, you can like just cut and splice because it's on a click track.
Right.
Yeah, and so Dan and I and Sean, I think we were done in 3 or 4 days, and somehow we yanked this record out of the ether. Like it was sort of waiting. It felt like it was fruit waiting to be plucked. Like,
yeah,
there's a bunch of songs on the record about the pandemic. Dreadful Things is one of the main ones. Oh, there's Mark's cats.
Yeah,
it's
Mark's
Jacob,
cats
Patrick,
are
Mark and a bunch of cats.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had sort of conceived of the record, and we were writing it in those brief rehearsals that were like an hour and a half or 2 hours at the most at Nucci Space. And then we just went in the studio and lightning struck, and Sean and Dan and I were done really quickly. The songs just kind of came to us. We had a lot of pent up, a lot of music bottled up.
Yeah. Well, I am really excited to hear it. And the name of the album is Help a Sinner.
Mm-hmm.
Very exciting.
That's right. It comes out on Static Era Records on May 8th. And then the vinyl, I think, is coming out early July probably. And that's a split label thing between Static Era and Chicken Ranch Records out of Austin. Yeah, we're really excited about it. It's a great record. The Help a Sinner, the title track is going to be a single with a music video very soon. And
do you want to talk about where the title comes from?
Yeah, we're really excited.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
You should, because I don't really know.
Of 5/8, and the guy who writes all the lyrics for the band was driving somewhere in Atlanta. And Atlanta, like every major American city right now, has a massive problem of people who are unhoused and sleeping rough and living desperately. And the guy was holding up a sign that said "Help a Sinner" on it, asking for money. And Mike was like, "Man, I need that sign." I think we all need that sign.
We all need that sign.
Yeah.
Help a sinner.
I'll be
great.
in Las Vegas with 352s the next week, and then I'm doing a run playing drums for Pylon, and then the record comes out, and we're gonna be running up and down the East Coast, and maybe we'll get out west, Jacob. I hope so. I would love for us to
I
get
hope
coffee or
so.
something.
I'd love to meet up. I think that would be fantastic. I'm really excited about the record, and just thrilled. I told Mark when we spoke the other day, I said it's total coincidence, and was meant to be that this episode was going to release on 5/8. I was looking ahead at the schedule, and I was like, well, if we do the interview this time, then it would be on this cycle. And I couldn't have been more happy to be like, not only is it on 5/8 with 5/8, and their album's releasing on 5/8, I was like, I truly get to have a 5/8 episode. And I'm just so pleased. So I'm over the moon about you guys taking this time. I really am hopeful. Are there plans to get Weirdo, the documentary, a place where everybody can see it? Is it?
Yeah, I can tell you now. So we've been holding out, hoping to get on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or sort of any place that I don't have to explain to my dad, like, how you download this weird app that you've never heard of or any of those things. But it's on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel called YouTube Movies and TV. And it's there now.
I'll make sure and link it.
You need to get the DVD though, man. Come on, you're a legacy media guy just like us.
Absolutely. I'm a physical media guy. I will get the DVD.
Mark just happens to have one
Jacob,
right there.
I will send you this. Absolutely. So this is it's a Blu-ray and a DVD. Both have all the same stuff. Every copy is signed by the band.
There's also
comes with a glow.
Oh, that's so great.
There's a commentary track too, which I think is maybe like if you want the full 5/8 experience, it's like being in a band with us while we watch the movie.
I love it. Well, since I have your captive audience right now, I'm going to tell you, I also have a movie that you can go watch, but you have to like comedy horror movies. It's a very silly, zany 80-minute film, but I am the writer and I play one of the main characters, but it's called I Had a Bloody Good Time at House Harker, and it is on Amazon Prime, or you can watch it, I think, on Plex, and I think there's a YouTube version that's for free, but it's very silly, buckets of blood type movie.
Love that.
I've seen it. I saw it recently,
Did you?
I really enjoyed
good.
it. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me of like the
Totally
Broken
Super
Lizard
Troopers.
movies, Super Troopers, Club Dread, those kind of things where you can just tell like this is a group of people who love each other and they just wanted to make something silly and fun, and that's what it is. And it's I was so happy.
I'm so glad.
Really good.
Do you have a like a group of guys, kind of like a band that you work with to do movie stuff, or?
Yeah. It was the team, and the ones that I made the film with. We were in 2011. We started on YouTube. A bunch of guys at the time in their 30s, new dads. We started making a comedy show called Good Cops, and it was fake mustaches, aviator glasses, and it was kind of Three Stooges. It was cartoon rules, very over the top, very broad, and that led us to making a Western comedy. And then by the time we got to the horror comedy, we had every intention of making another YouTube show. And then we looked at what we had put out there, and you go, wait a second, you had all this together. It's a feature length, and so we were like, before we die making these thankless projects that nobody's watching, let's at least say we made a movie, and we all love each other very much. It did, just like a band, rip us apart sometimes and bring us back together over and over again, but they are family, they're friends, they're brothers that I will probably know and commiserate with till the day I die, and we'll always talk to each other about we should make another movie, and then everybody's like, whoa.
I just want to go a tiny bit deeper in my whole whole thing about at the intersection of art and commerce. That's where all the bodies are buried beside the road.
Please.
I feel like the thing that 5/8 got lucky about is that we pushed through that period where every artistic decision felt like life or death. And we came to realize that it was just about vision and compromise. I think that's kind of what killed Orson Welles, is this inability to like push past the point where it has to be acceptable to an idealized vision of how will this make money. And you get to a point like, I just sometimes I wonder if like all these bands we know that broke up over creative differences, that really were breaking up over creative differences, or in your case, theater groups where you were ripping each other's guts out, or movie group, performance group. If you can get the idea that this has to be sellable out of the equation, then I think that there's a tremendous freedom on the other side of that. And fortunately, 5/8 was able to mature to the point that we could continue to make art and not want to like kill each other with firewood, like, and I think that there's just so much pressure on bands that start to make a lot of money that they can't ever move past it, Like what happens is the label gives you $1 million, that's a nice big round number. And then they show up at the studio and they say, we gave you $1 million. You need to make the record that we want you to make.
Right.
And they get in the process. And if nobody ever gives you $1 million, they don't have the ability to yank your chain,
Yeah.
And you can just keep making music that matters. And don't get me wrong, there was a period of 5/8 would have cheerfully signed in our own blood on any contract the devil put in front of us.
Sure.
Sure. But nobody was buying. So we were like, souls for sale. Oh, nobody interested. Okay. Well, I guess we'll just keep doing this thing, Souls for sale, by the way, reference to the band Verbena. If you're not familiar with Verbena, it will change your life.
Okay.
They have 2 amazing records. One is Souls for Sale, and the name of the other one is temporarily escaping me. But they were a band from Birmingham, Alabama, that flew too close to the sun too fast. But both of those records hold up to me, make me feel like I could run through a brick wall listening to them. They're so good.
All right.
Yeah,
I will make note.
BENA.
Okay.
Unbelievable band. I have an episode of my podcast in the can. That's an interview with the bass player of that band. And we talked for about 90 minutes, and at the end of it, he was like, I haven't talked this much about Verbena ever, and I kind of don't want to anymore.
Well, great recommendation and great advice, and I do agree with you because we also, as a group of friends, don't look at it anymore like we did back then, but I think the reason why we healed was we let go of that.
Yeah.
And, even my journey that you guys have witnessed and how you found me is I let go of all that as well. I let go of like, I'm doing this to get something out of it. And so once that kind of set me free, once you're just doing art because you love making art, it really does. It's the most simple thing in the world. It's a simple pleasure. And the fact that people want to watch is great, so, but ending on this journey and 5/8 and the time that we've spent here together tonight, thank you again. I'm excited about the record. Please let me know about going on the road. And to my audience, definitely go give 5/8 a listen. I will link the YouTube to the film. I'll be getting myself a DVD with a pic in it. And then, of course, if you are on the East Coast and you see 5/8 is going to be playing in a city near you, please go check them out. I think you're going to have a great time. They are a really, really great band.
Thanks, Jacob. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Yeah, people can check out the band at 58.com and the movie at weirdomovie.com. And we're so happy to have talked to
great.
you. This was
It was great.
amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, man. Thank you, not only for today, thank you for
100%.
everything you do. I think the positivity you bring to music and to an appreciation for art is something we are fully on board
Thank
for.
you, Mark.
So thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you soon. So you see, that's why I wanted to bring back the remote virtual interviews. There's just too many amazing conversations to be had with people all around the world on the opposite side of the country that won't often get the chance to make it to the West Coast or won't have the time if they're on the tours or on the road to stop by my house because it's a tight schedule. All right, let's wrap things up. It's been a long one today. So thank you again to Pantheon Podcasts. You are making this show possible to be heard by more and more people all around the world. So thank you, Pantheon Podcasts. They are one of the biggest music podcast providers out there, and Waterproof Records is part of the Pantheon Podcast family. So I'm grateful for that. And also, don't forget to be using my distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof link. Get your 30% off your first year and take advantage of that. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you learned a little bit more about 5/8 and the music they've been putting out for 40 years. And definitely, if you get a chance, go check them out. If you're on the East Coast, you have a better chance of seeing them live, but maybe one of these days, I'll be lucky enough to have them on the West Coast. But thanks again for supporting Waterproof Records. I can't do this show without you, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna